Shalom. All praise and glory to Yahweh Basham Yahweh Shah Basham Kakwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles. And honors and salutations to you, Akim, that's laboring. Shalakia, I got a head cold, so bear with me. I've been under the weather. Anyways, this lesson was inspired by me watching the documentary on RT News about Parchment Prison down in Mississippi, which is one of the southern states. And pretty much, this state prison literally was made and designed after the plantations, because it is a plantation. And pretty much, the sons of Jacob, beginning with the so-called blacks, experienced harsh conditions in this prison that was placed and set up by the so-called white man Esau, Edom. And during the documentary, it was very interesting, because it was just tied into hardcore slavery to the T. With the morning hunt for black prisoners, with the bloodhounds and shooting them down for sport with rifles and shotguns and stuff like that. That's the same thing they did in hardcore slavery. You can look that up on your own. But pretty much, this prison has been a established plantation for many decades. Ran by yours truly, like I said, the so-called white man Esau. So this is Mississippi State Prison, or Penitentiary, which is also known as Parchment, or Parchment Farm. All right. It says, begun with 4 stockades in 1901, the Mississippi Department of Corrections facility was constructed largely by state prisoners. It has beds for 4,840 inmates, which they would overcrowd Jake in these prisons. You have a one-man cell, and you have about 8 bodies in there. Just like the slave ships. All right. It says inmates worked on the prison farm and in manufacturing workshops. It holds male offenders classified at all custody levels: A and B custody, minimum and medium security, and C and D custody, maximum security. It also houses the male death row. All male offenders sentenced to death in Mississippi are held in MSP's Unit 29 in the State Execution Chamber. The superintendent of Mississippi State Penitentiary is Marshall Turner. There are 2 wardens, 3 deputy wardens, and 2 associate wardens. So let's go into the history, because I want you, Akim, out there, and you few women of Israel, to see just how cruel and violent that Esau is to Jacob. It says, for much of the 19th century, after the American Civil War, the state of Mississippi used a convict lease system for its prisoners. Lessees paid fees to the state and were responsible for feeding, clothing, and housing prisoners who worked for them as laborers. Basically, you were a slave. All right. You was first of all, when the state prison started, when Jake was sent there, they was forced to work. If you're forced to work, you're a slave. All right. It says, as a matter of fact, to back that up, I had to pull up the 13th Amendment, of course, which states neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Um, most of these jakes was locked up for petty crimes. You know, from the most pettiest crime you could think of, and they was given long sentences so they could serve Esau's purpose in, being forced laborers. All right, pretty much just being all out slaves. You know, they ran it just like the plantation. But that was Esau's excuse. His excuse was, well, they committed crimes, and we all know that committing crime in Esau's society is really nothing at all. All right, it says, as it was lucrative for both the state and lessees, as in other states, the system led to entrapment. And see, entrapment. Well, matter of fact, let's look that word up. Entrapment. Let's see. Entrapment. It says a defense that claims the defendant would not have broken the law if not tricked into doing it by law enforcement officials. It's a dirty little game Esau play. All right, so continuing on, it says, as it was lucrative for both the state and lessees, as in other states, the system led to entrapment and a high rate of convictions for minor offenses for black males, whose population as prisoners increased rapidly in the decades after the Civil War, and that's roughly after so-called freeing the slaves, which we know the word emancipate means to hand over as property or transfer as property. So, our people were still slaves. It says, wrongly accused of having a high rate of criminality, black males often struggle for years to get out of the convict lease system. Yeah, it's by design. They set the sentences, which, within J community we call it tails. You go before Esau's injustice system, it's this courthouse, and they give you a tail. Now it may be like a 2 to 4 years, or who knows, 3 to 10 years. And they can go over that as well. All right. By law, they can do that. And we know that the law was established by Esau, for Esau, to oppress us. This is Isaiah chapter 10, verse 1. It says, woe, which means destruction to you. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed. Now, that's exactly what the so-called white man have done for the so-called blacks and the so-called Latinos. All right. They wrote these unrighteous decrees or laws, and they affect, so-called minorities, because when you look at the prison industrial complex, all right, which is basically so many prisons, whether they're privately rented or whatever, but they're all filled with mainly so-called black and Latino men, all right, where they do the same thing that they do down at Parchment, which forced labor, right? They pay them so many cents a day for doing so much labor, and who's benefiting? The state, local, and federal government. All right, all in the false pretense of committing the crime, which really shouldn't even be a crime. Let's continue on. It says, due to abuses and corruption, the state ended this program after December 31st, 1894. It finally had to build prisons to accommodate convicted persons, which they're lying. This has been going on, an ongoing fight, even to this very day. All right. Like I was saying, this it's an ongoing thing to this very day. People are protesting about Parchment Prison, and the people that are protesting are mainly Jake. All right, so it says, due to abuses and corruption, the state ended this program after December 31st, 1894, and it finally had to build prisons to accommodate convicted persons. The state of Mississippi began to acquire property to build its first correctional facilities. But as Douglas Blackman explores in his book, Slavery by Another Name, which truly it is, a study of the convict lease system, the South kept a system of convict labor in place until World War II. Generations of black men were trapped in the system. And it's still going on to this very day, A lot of the men of our people, men of Israel, are trapped into Esau's legal system, or convict lease system. All right. And and you got Jake that's our they senators and governors, they always talk about the system is broken. No, the system is not broken. It's put into place to do exactly what it's doing. It's not broken at all. Esau designed it to do exactly what it's doing. It says, in 1900, the Mississippi State Legislature appropriated U.S. $80,000 for the purchase of the Parchment Plantation, a 3,789 acre property in Sunflower County. What is now the prison property was located at a railroad spur called Gordon Station. So that's why the scripture said, "Behold, we are yet in captivity to this very day." Or it says, "Behold, we are yet in our captivity." Roughly paraphrasing, Baruch, the 3rd chapter, about the 8th verse. Jacob is prisoners. The scriptures speak about us being prisoners. Let's go to it. The scriptures speak exactly about Jacob being prisoners. Because we are heavily held as prisoners. Isaiah 14. When you go to the top of this chapter, it's talking about us taking captives. The people who had us captives. It's talking about when you go into it. It's talking about the so-called white man Esau. All right. It said, and we should rule over our oppressors. The main people that oppress us is the Edomites. But continuing on, we're going to jump down to the point right here in Isaiah 14 and 17. It says, that made the world as a wilderness, which the so-called white man does, and destroyed the cities thereof. And he destroyed many cities across this earth, It says that opened not the house of his prisoners. America has alone more than 25% of the world's prison population. Just America alone. Just the mainland of America. All right, which is the U.S., the so-called U.S. That's a big statement, And while at this prison, Jake had to face, plantation, similarities. All right, whether it's sicking the dogs on them, lynching them, all that. All right, all that went on and occurred at this prison. All right, and like I said, the hunting for so-called black men or so-called black prisoners, all right, for sport, that was just straight up violence. And then they would just put on a flyer that this person was missing, like a person had went AWOL, and all along they murdered this individual or these so-called black prisoners. It's crazy. All right. Let's see. This is Isaiah chapter 42, verse 7. In fact, let me see. Start at 6. All right. It says, I, Yahweh, have called thee in righteousness and withhold thine hand, and will hold thy hand, and will keep thee and give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles, to open the blind eyes, to bring out the prisoners from the prison, and them that sit in darkness out of the prison house. Now, that's going into Israelite foreigners as well. All right. It's not talking about the actual Gentiles, that particular precept. All right, because you have to be able to discern that, The Most High doesn't care about the Gentiles. All right, He cares about Israelites. So we know it's talking about bringing out Israelite prisoners from the prison. And even those of us that are out here in the what we call out here in the world, meaning that we're out here so-called free. I mean, we're still prisoners as well. All right. America is our main prison, as we always mention and say, because it truly is. All right. And that's the reason why we need the Most High Heavenly Father Yahweh to send back Yahweh Shah to open up the house of the prison. Meaning what? To liberate us and deliver us from America, And now, let's go back to, because I want to go to this guy right here, James K. Vardaman. I mean, how does he play a major part at Parchment? Well, he's the founder. All right, he's the founder of Parchment. All right, this man right here. he was governor of Mississippi. Now, let's go right to it. All right. Let's see. Oh, what is it? This paragraph right here is important. Excuse me. All right, here we go. Coming up. All right, it says, this is, and by the way, this man is James K. Vardaman again, and he's the founder of Parchment Prison. Now it says right here, Vardaman advocated a policy of state-sponsored racism against blacks, and said that he supported lynching to maintain white supremacy. From 1877 to 1950, Mississippi had the highest number of lynchings in the nation. He was known as the Great White Chief. Okay. So, there you had it. There you have it. Esau, red-handed, And this is one of his quotes. He says, "If it is necessary, every Negro in the state will be lynched. It will be done to maintain white supremacy." All right. Which, this is your kingdom, Esau. But, remember, we're going to have a thing called Israelite supremacy in the kingdom of heaven. All right? Think about that. A guy like that found a state prison, made it like a plantation. You already know what's going on. Because they actually was lynching, Israelite prisoners at the prison. That's something else you can look up. Obadiah, verse 10, it says, "For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever." You so-called white people wonder why your kingdom is falling. And every evil, wicked thing that you was doing behind closed doors, why it's been revealed during this time. Why your kingdom is falling before your very eyes. There's nothing you can do about it. It's because the Most High, your Father, man. All right. You see that this civil war is upon you, and you worry about the racial tensions, and you calling Jacob your brothers. Well, the scripture said that thou shalt be cut off forever because of the violence against us, from the so-called Negro to the so-called Mexican. There's been nothing but violence that has been inflicted upon us by you Edomites, man, by you rednecks. Because, James Vardaman, he said he was a proud redneck, which is, right on point, because the scriptures call you Edomites red. That's what the word Edom means. It means red. You truly are red. This is Amos chapter 1, verse 11. It says, "Thus saith Yahweh, Bashem Yahushua, for 3 transgressions of Edom, and for 4, I would not turn away the punishment thereof, because he did pursue his brother with the sword." Doing the hunt thing, hunting black persons for sport, with your weapons, with your rifles, your shotguns. That's a sword. All right. A sword is an instrument that brings forth death. All right. The modern day sword is the handgun on up to the missiles. All right. It says, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he did pursue his brother with the sword, and did cast off all pity, and his anger did tear perpetually, and he kept his wrath forever. And you see it, because for many decades, all right, beginning of the 19th century, all right, or the 20th century, however you want to call it, all right, the late 1800s, all right, on up to recently, which is now, or present, I should say present day, I'm sorry. All right, this parchment had been in play, as do many other state penitentiaries or Department of Corrections. And that's why guys like, Michael Jeffrey Jordan should be ashamed of themselves, knowing that places like this exist for the oppression and brutality and abuse of your own people. Man, you should be ashamed of yourself, man. All right. But this is a clear example how you Edomites kept your wrath forever, That's why the scripture said you're going to have judgment without mercy. All right. And we hope to see that real soon. This is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 35. Start at verse 3. It says, and say unto it, I'm sorry, let me start up at 1. Moreover, the word of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir, which was inhabited by you Edomites, and it pertains to you Edomites. Excuse me. It says, and prophesy against it, and say unto it, Thus saith the Lord power, behold, O Mount Seir, I am against thee, which represent you Edomites. It says, I am against thee, and I will stretch out my hand against thee, and I will make thee most desolate. I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate, and thou shalt know that I am Yahweh. Verse 5, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword. This parchment prison is a clear-cut example of, shedding our blood by the sword. If this Emancipation Proclamation was so true, why did places like Parchment, and other state penitentiaries, why was it built? How was it established and created? If the so-called blacks was free, showing you that what? They was never freed. Neither was none of us, none of the tribes. It says, and has shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end. Therefore, as I live, saith the Lord power, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. So thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. All right. And that goes back to the law, the Most High's law, eye for eye, blood for blood. And Esau has shed a lot of Israelite blood. The nation of Esau is responsible directly for a lot of Israelite bloodshed. So the Most High Heavenly Father is going to require that blood at your hands, Esau. Remember, we're his peculiar treasure, and we're also the apple of his eye. And also we're joined All right, we're married unto the Most High, meaning we're joined unto the Most High. We're His sons. And that's why the Most High said He's going to avenge us of you, man. It's all your abuse to us, man. All the heinous atrocities you do to us, man. And you have the nerve to act like we're spewing hate when you always shown us hate, but when we show you hatred back, and it's a problem, man. But there's always something that you're doing to oppress or to overthrow our people or destroy our people. All right. So the scriptures say that He should have judgment without mercy. And we look forward to that. We look forward to you having judgment without mercy, Esau. And the scriptures also say that he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. All right. So you're going to go into captivity just like you led us in captivity, Esau. So with that, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying to you, Akim, that may have tuned in, and you few sisters that may have tuned in. Like I said, Shalaki, I'm under the weather, so bear with me. I'm getting over a head cold, a pretty bad head cold. So until next time, Shalom.